Something extraordinary happened inside the Pentagon last night, and the details are only now beginning to leak out through the people who were in the room. Senior military officials, not politicians, not political appointees, but career generals and admirals who have spent decades studying Iran's military capabilities, sat across from the President of the United States and told him something that no commander-in-chief wants to hear before ordering a military strike. They told him that Iran is ready, not bluffing, not posturing, not performing strength for domestic audiences, actually, operationally, militarily ready for a full-scale war. And the implications of that assessment are shaking the foundations of American strategy in the region in ways that the public has not been fully told about. Let's talk about what we know, what it means, and why this moment inside the Pentagon may end up being more consequential than any missile launch or drone strike we've seen so far. The meeting, according to multiple sources familiar with the discussion, lasted over 3 hours. That alone is telling. Presidential military briefings on crisis situations are typically tight, focused, and compressed. Commanders are trained to deliver their assessments concisely because they know the president's time and attention are finite. A 3-hour session means the conversation went far beyond the standard briefing format. It means there were arguments being made, pushbacks being offered, assessments being challenged. It means people in that room disagreed with each other in front of the president, which is exactly what the system is designed for, and exactly what makes those sessions so consequential. What came out of it, according to sources, was a military assessment that is significantly more cautious than the public posture of the administration would suggest. The generals are not saying, "Don't strike Iran." They're saying that anyone who believes a strike on Iran will be quick, clean, and decisive is operating on assumptions that the intelligence does not support. Iran's military preparedness is the product of 4 decades of deliberate, patient investment in exactly the kind of capabilities that make a conflict with a technologically superior adversary costly and prolonged. This is not an accident. Iran watched what happened to Iraq in 1991 and again in 2003. They watched what happened to Libya in 2011. They studied American military doctrine with the same rigor that American analysts study theirs. And they concluded early on that they could never match American conventional military power in a straight fight. So they didn't try. Instead, they built something different. A layered, asymmetric military architecture designed to make the cost of attacking Iran so high that any American president would have to think very carefully before pulling the trigger. The Pentagon's assessment, as it has been described to us, is that Iran has succeeded in this objective to a greater degree than American public discourse has acknowledged. The specific capabilities that are making military planners nervous break down into several categories. The first is Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, which is now the largest in the Middle East. Iran has invested heavily in missiles for decades, and the result is a force of thousands of ballistic missiles of varying ranges, accuracies, and warhead types. Many of these missiles are mobile, launched from trucks that can move, fire, and relocate before American counter-battery systems can target the launch point. Others are stored in hardened underground facilities that are specifically designed to survive American conventional strikes. The missiles themselves have been continuously improved. The accuracy of Iran's latest generation of ballistic missiles is significantly better than what they had even 5 years ago. Better accuracy means smaller warheads can achieve the same damage, which means Iran can carry more missiles on each launcher, which means the volume of fire they can generate in a short window is greater than previous generations of American war planning assumed. The second category is Iran's air defense network. This is the area where American planners are perhaps most concerned, because air superiority is the foundation on which all American conventional military operations are built. The ability to fly aircraft over enemy territory safely, to deliver precision munitions without losing pilots and planes, is the central assumption of every American military campaign since the Gulf War. Iran has spent enormous resources trying to deny that assumption. Their air defense network combines Russian-supplied S-300 systems, domestically produced Bavar-373 systems that are specifically engineered to resist American jamming and electronic warfare, and a dense network of shorter-range systems that cover the gaps between the longer-range batteries. Crucially, Iran has also invested heavily in camouflage, concealment, and deception, moving air defense systems regularly, using decoys that mimic the radar signature of actual systems, and creating a targeting problem for American strike planners that is significantly more complex than it was even a decade ago. American stealth aircraft can penetrate this network, but not without cost. And not every aircraft America needs to use against Iran is a stealth aircraft. The third category is what military planners call anti-access and area denial. The weapons and tactics Iran would use to make the Persian Gulf and the surrounding waters as dangerous as possible for American naval forces. Iran has studied American carrier operations intensively and has built a suite of capabilities specifically designed to threaten aircraft carriers. Long-range anti-ship missiles, some of them supersonic and some of them maneuvering, meaning they change direction in flight to complicate interception. Swarms of fast attack craft that can overwhelm point defense systems through sheer numbers. Submarines. Mines. Shore-based missile batteries that can reach out hundreds of miles into the Gulf. The combination is not designed to sink American carriers in a set-piece naval battle. It's designed to make operating carriers in the Gulf so dangerous and so costly that American commanders start pulling them back to safer distances, which reduces their effectiveness as strike platforms. A carrier operating from outside the Gulf has less range, less flexibility, less punch than one operating from inside it. That's the strategic calculation behind Iran's anti-access investments. The fourth category is one that gets very little coverage, but which is, in some ways, the most consequential for the day-to-day lives of Americans who will never come anywhere near the Persian Gulf. Iran's cyber capabilities. The Islamic Republic has invested heavily in offensive cyber operations since the early 2010s, when the Stuxnet attack, widely attributed to the United States and Israel, destroyed centrifuges at Iran's Natanz nuclear facility. Iran learned from Stuxnet. They built their own cyber warfare capability, and they've been using it against Saudi Aramco in 2012, against American banks in 2012 and 2013, against government agencies and critical infrastructure in various forms since then. What Iranian cyber operators have been doing in more recent years, according to intelligence assessments, is pre-positioning, establishing persistent access to American critical infrastructure, power grids, water treatment facilities, financial system components, that could be activated in the event of a conflict. The threat of activating those pre-positioned access points is Iran's Cyber Deterrent, and it's a deterrent that doesn't care about American military superiority. A cyber attack on American power grid infrastructure in a major city doesn't require Iran to outfight the US Navy. It requires a few dozen skilled operators sitting in front of computers in Tehran. The fifth and final category is the one that frames all the others: Iran's willingness to absorb punishment. This is the dimension that is hardest to quantify and easiest to underestimate. American military planning tends to assume that adversaries, when confronted with overwhelming American military power, will eventually make rational calculations about their own survival and stand down. That assumption has been wrong before. In Vietnam, in various phases of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but it remains a powerful default. The Iranian leadership, and particularly the IRGC commanders who would be running the military operations, are not people who reached their positions by being risk-averse. They came up through the brutal experience of the Iran-Iraq War, which lasted 8 years and killed hundreds of thousands of Iranians, and which the Islamic Republic survived despite being attacked with chemical weapons and facing an enemy that was backed by much of the international community. The institutional memory of the IRGC is a memory of endurance under conditions that would have broken most militaries. That institutional culture is not an asset to be underestimated. What did the generals actually recommend to Trump? This is where our sources become more careful, and we should be too. What we can say is that the military recommendation was not simply go ahead and strike. There were significant caveats attached to whatever operational plans were presented. Among them, Any strike needs to be large enough to achieve decisive degradation of Iranian capabilities, because a strike that is too small will be absorbed and will actually strengthen the Iranian government's domestic position. The first strike needs to neutralize Iran's retaliatory capabilities as much as possible before those capabilities can be activated, which means hitting a very large number of targets simultaneously and in the first hours. The political and international situation needs to be prepared in advance, because a military campaign that loses Allied support quickly will face constraints that reduce its effectiveness. And the American public needs to be prepared for a conflict that will not be short. The generals, to their credit, were apparently very direct on this last point. "This is not going to be over in weeks," one of them reportedly said. "Anyone who tells you otherwise is not being honest with you." Trump's reaction to this briefing is the most closely watched variable in Washington right now. People who know him well describe him as having two competing instincts in situations like this. The first instinct is the instinct of the dealmaker, the person who believes that every confrontation, however intense, ultimately comes down to leverage and negotiation, and that military action is a means to a negotiating end rather than an end in itself. The second instinct is the instinct of the showman, the person who understands that moments of historical drama are opportunities to demonstrate the kind of strength that defines legacies. The Pentagon briefing was, in effect, an argument for the first instinct, a reminder that military action here is not a clean, decisive expression of strength, but a complicated, costly, and uncertain undertaking, with outcomes that nobody can fully control. Whether that argument penetrated is a question only Trump can answer, and he has not answered it publicly. What's happening in the rest of the American government as this plays out is worth tracking carefully. The State Department is in a different posture than the Defense Department. Diplomatic officials are more urgently exploring any channel that might produce a negotiated outcome, because they're aware that the window for diplomacy narrows with every hour that military preparations continue. The intelligence community is watching Iranian force movements with extraordinary intensity, looking for any signal that Iran is about to do something that would make American restraint irrelevant. A preemptive strike of some kind that would force an American response, regardless of what the president had decided. Congress is divided, as it has been on almost every major national security question for years. Some members are calling for immediate military action. Others are demanding a congressional vote before any strikes are launched. The administration has given no indication that it considers congressional authorization necessary for whatever it's planning. The allies are perhaps the most uncertain variable of all. America's Gulf partners, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, have American bases on their soil. Those bases are critical to any military operation against Iran. But using those bases means those countries become targets for Iranian retaliation, and all of them have complex relationships with Tehran that they're reluctant to risk entirely. Some have quietly communicated that they want notice before any strikes are launched, so they can make their own preparations. Others have been more forthcoming. The British have indicated willingness to support American operations, but not to lead them. The Israelis are in a different category entirely. They're not just willing to participate, they're eager to, and they've been sharing intelligence and operational planning with American counterparts in ways that have made some American officials uncomfortable about how closely the two operations are being coordinated. The bottom line from the Pentagon briefing, the thing that the generals wanted Trump to understand above all else, is that the decision to strike Iran is a decision to begin something, not to end something. It is the opening move in a conflict whose duration, cost, and conclusion cannot be determined in advance. Every military campaign has a plan. No military campaign survives contact with the enemy entirely according to that plan. Iran will respond. The response will create new situations. Those new situations will require new decisions, and each of those decisions will have consequences of their own. The generals know this because they've seen it happen, in Iraq and in Afghanistan, in ways that shaped their entire professional lives. They're not saying don't do it, they're saying go in with your eyes open. The question is whether the man sitting across from them was actually listening, and the world is about to find out.